All right, we are recording again. My name is Luke Angstad. The title of our YouTube channel is The Business of Esoteric Knowledge and Wisdom. One second, right here we have, I was just gonna say that I have a co-host, Peter, who wasn't going to be with us, but he has just entered the room, so I will bring him in momentarily. Also, we have Gavin Burns from Las Vegas as a guest again. He was on about a couple weeks ago, and he showed interest in coming back on our program again. So it's great to have Gavin on. What we've been generally doing is kind of summarizing where we're at. Hey, Peter, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Good
How you doing, Gavin?
Good to see you.
Good, Peter. How you doing, brother?
I'm very fine. I'm actually excellent. I just
Oh,
ate with
good.
my family, and so I'm reappearing.
So
Yeah,
Peter,
sorry
what
for a
was
little delay.
Peter, before Gavin and I started recording and before you came on, I was telling Gavin that I'm kind of pressed for time today. So I can only probably go maybe 40 minutes or so because I haven't engaged. I'm going to the airport to interview people about the mask mandate being lifted. And I have, it's someone who has a connection with InfoWars and Alex Jones and another media outlet called the Gateway Pundit. So it was kind of spur of the moment, but it's, maybe it's possibly a good publicity stunt for us to do to draw interest with our channel. So I was kind of going to keep it short today, and I was just about to make our introductions and let our audience know that I usually have a co-host here, Peter, who wasn't with us, but now that you joined us, I'll recap again. My name's Luke Angstad. I'm the author of the book, The Musings of De La Pew. It's a study about the nature of reality, the nature of God, human beings, and the relationship between all three of them. My co-host, Peter Rusevich, is in Serbia. He also has 3 books on the occult and hidden knowledge available on Amazon. And also, just to briefly recap, we have Gavin Burns from Las Vegas. He was a friend of mine. We were roommates a few years ago. He was here a few weeks ago, and he showed great interest in joining the conversation again. And I'm happy to have him back on. And I will always have the open invitation for Gavin to join us anytime he wants. So without any further ado, I want my co-host Peter to introduce himself. And then Gavin, you can introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can get into it.
Hello, my name is Peter Rozovic. I am the co-host of this channel, The Business of Esoteric Knowledge and Wisdom, and I'm also an author of books on Amazon. And the books are called Nikola Tesla, Third Reich and the Extraterrestrials, A Culture, and the Mythologies of Techno World, and all of them are vividly and definitely available and purchasable. So go for them and buy them, What else?
All right, and Gavin, you want to tell our audience a little about yourself again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a regular guy, friends with Luke, who loves to engage in philosophical discussion. I don't have anything to plug, but always enjoy talking with Luke about this kind of stuff. So happy to get into it again, man.
All right. Sure. And since I'm kind of a little bit slammed for time today, I just wanted to kind of recap where we were at before, because it's kind of the pattern of our show. We kind of recap where we're left off at the previous episode, and then we segue into the next episode by whatever ideas are fostered by recapping. But where we're at before is we were discussing the nature of alchemy, and how alchemy is not just the medieval practice of transforming base metals into gold, but it also has associations with spiritual transformation. And Peter got into a wonderful conversation about how Nikola Tesla was an alchemist of sorts, and also of the alchemist of the spiritual transformation type. And that might be, I don't know if we have enough time to get into to continue that one there, but if Peter's okay with it, Gavin, before we started recording, wanted to get in on the nature of like, what is consciousness. So at some point in our conversations, while Gavin was away, he said, I'd really want to get it on that. So Peter, if you're open to that, we could hand the baton to Gavin and we could talk about the nature of consciousness.
Well, the very definition of consciousness, or at least the at most approximate definition of it, because none of the quantum physicists has ever succeeded to give the proper definition of it. There are certainly many of them, but the most satisfying one, the one that suits the needs of the quantum physics and the mind of today's man, is that the consciousness would be uh, uh, you know, and let me put it this way. Let's say that the consciousness is, you know, it's,
Is it a being? Is it a spirit? Is it an awareness? I mean, that's why
well,
it kind of
those
gets
are
tricky
the
because it's almost-
electromagnetic, those are the
Yeah.
electromagnetic fields that are gifted by the ability of self-awareness,
Mhm.
although it seems as a paradox, because it's the part of the consciousness, the great et,
Mhm.
and it's while it's separated, it's split from the great et after the great schism, as we've concluded previously,
Mhm.
because of the inner need of the great et to create, right?
Mhm.
So those are the electromagnetic fields that are united by the internal time.
Mhm.
Okay, time is a being. Time is a d constant zero. It's here. It's Andromeda. It's on the Aldebaran. The past momentum is the present as well, although it is spatially removed. This present time is the present itself. And the future is also the present of the future, although it's spatially removed from this moment on. So what do we notice in the meanwhile? What we notice is motion, right? So what's been present, it's already past, but it's still the present because it's the constant present. So this is the time with the great capitalized T, time as being. But when I say the electromagnetic fields capable of self-awareness and unified by the intern time, I meant the intern time, the time of the particular consciousness, and the biological time of the biosystem.
Mhm.
So that would be something that the majority, I guess, of the quantum physicists will certainly agree with,
Mhm.
you know, because really none of none of the humans does not know the very definition of
Mhm.
what the consciousness is.
Mhm.
It is the part of the great being, the great as, which still remains incomprehensible. The human brain, the human psyche, the human consciousness, the particular one that we just discussed about is capable to unveil the secret of the creation. I'm having the formula of the creation. I know how the creation goes,
Mhm.
but who stands or what stands behind the veil of the creation will be, and it should be, should remain unrecognizable and incomprehensible.
Mhm.
So,
But nevertheless, it is though, right? It's something that we can't define, and
uh-huh.
the more definitions we try to put on it, the farther away we come. I mean, it's a catch-22. The farther we come from understanding it, and I mean, the harder we try to understand it, and the harder we try to define it and understand it, we're pulling away from it. So it's like the ultimate catch-22, because nevertheless, there's something that resides in eternity behind the manifesting world that is the great mover that is unseen. Yet, yeah, in the periphery, we're all aware of it, right? I mean, and you almost have to speak in these in mysterious poetical haiku forms to describe it, because it's indescribable, but we know it's there, right? And Gavin, I think
Yeah.
that what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we call it the great consciousness with a capital C, the great being. I mean, there are so many names for it. I mean, for lack of a better term, people call it God, but I mean, Peter's describing it in the terms of physics and quantum physics. And I'll tell you what, it's a brilliant explanation, Peter, and I thank you for it. But it's very heady stuff to describe something that we're all aware of. But what it's like the moment you try to put your finger on it, boom, it's gone, it vanishes. And
yeah, because you put it into the frame of a semiotic explanation, or at least an attempt of an explanation of. And humans are the beings that intend consciously or unconsciously to describe the things and meanings by words. But when the particular consciousness enters into the great S, which emanates, which emerges, which reappears as the primordial clear light. It enters the realm actually where the things are not comprehensible and describable by words anymore. So it's beyond the boundary of language, which would sound silly to me because I do the languages. That's my chosen field in this realm.
Sure. So Gavin, what do you make of this? I mean, because it's not an easy subject to talk about, or to even wrap your head to try even begin to wrap our heads around this. But what are your thoughts on some of this?
Yeah, I mean, even as Peter said, like quantum physicists and neuroscientists, we still are nowhere near close to defining exactly what consciousness is. We understand, neural pathways and synapses firing, motivation, all that kind of stuff. We kind of touched on the last time we spoke, but I remember talking to a programmer once. I was probably 20 and, full of confidence and thought I knew everything. And we were talking about consciousness, and I was like, well, consciousness is just a computer. It's a database that you draw from. And he's like, no, it isn't. The user is consciousness, because the user decides what function to create, what it wants to do. And I'm like, and that sort of was like, oh yeah, like consciousness is like it's with the experiencer. Like, so we can have all this information, but the things I choose to do with that information, like that's what I mean. But it's really gets complicated to describe what it is, because it is like the receiver, the me, the individual, that I could be constructed by everything I've experienced in my life, everything that I've heard, everything I've read, every conversation I've ever had, my parents, my friends, all that stuff. It forms somewhat of an identity, but the part of me that decides whether I believe something or not, or I don't believe something, I feel like that's kind of where the line of consciousness is the experiencer. What I'm experiencing and what I choose to do. But it's like you said, dude, it's just so hard to try to explain it, especially for someone like me. I have no qualifications, but it's such an interesting topic to explore. And not to repeat myself, but something that kind of lifts the veil on it was like my psychedelic experiences, is because it's like, what makes something real? Because at the end of the day, it's like I'm an observer watching. Whatever I see, whatever I hear is how I form my reality. And if that can all just be switched off with a drug, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a drug. It could be a piece of music that puts you into a different state of consciousness. Yeah. So
right.
Like, what's consciousness? Is it my experience of reality and how I choose to interact with it? I don't know. What do you think, Luke?
I think it's a combination of when the conversation with Peter and I think you may have jumped in on it too in the previous episode, Gavin, is how kind of like how with AI. I mean, we're having a marriage between the cutting edge of technological and scientific understanding with ancient spiritual practices. And I'm seeing this like when Nikola Tesla would meditate in order to access the information energy field in the ionosphere. I mean, it wasn't this hard trial and error laborious process. I mean, he was practicing doing the ancient spiritual practice of just clearing the mind, meditating, laying down, clearing the mind. And by doing something that spiritual adepts have been doing for thousands of years, he was able to tap into the information source where all of this, the free energy source, exists. And I find it to be the case with our understanding of consciousness too, is that where we're at with the cutting edge understanding of science and technology is kind of bridging the gap between ancient spiritual practices and understanding too. So, but it also circles me around to the fact that we can't define it, we can describe it, and maybe we are just describing the symptoms of consciousness, but to get to the very root of it, that may always be elusive.
Right. It's not like consciousness is a mathematical equation. Like,
I mean, that's part of it, right? That's one
That's-
understanding of it, but it's something else entirely as well.
but yeah, in order for us to understand as human beings and having a conversation, it's more of your experience of
Mhm.
consciousness, I feel, is more important
Mhm.
than this is the equation of what consciousness is, you know, or whatever. It's, I feel like us discussing our experience of consciousness or what we think it is kind of more useful when putting it in context,
Mhm.
in conversation. But yeah, no, I agree, man. Yeah.
Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, it definitely has to have the mathematical equation because, okay, if the most applicable definition would be as I just said, the electromagnetic fields that are united by their their interior, just like the several layers, we can possibly imagine them as circulating layers in the form of a sphere. This is not just my imagination because certain adepts were just describing what's improperly called soul, or what I call the consciousness, or what three of us call the consciousness, and that really is the electromagnetic level, and thus, as Gavin said, it has to have a mathematical explanation.
Absolutely.
Because those electromagnetic fields have their own internal potential and can be put in the form of an equation, so they can be transferred into the mathematical language, into the language of mathematics, of math. So yeah, definitely. But you know, the electromagnetic realm and level is reserved for the consciousness, the awareness. Because let's make a tiny dichotomy between the two terms. Let's say that the consciousness with the capitalized C is what we call the great as well as you've noted that in your book, the musings of De La Pew. And I agree with it. And this is what the Vedic researchers and the quantum physicists would agree with. That's definite. And but each of the particular consciousness it can be put in the form of awareness, although those are still the dispersed, the sprinkled, the spread, the separated parts of the consciousness with capitalized C. And there's also the lower level, the psychic or mental level, which I don't know, at least in this very moment, I don't know if it can be described in the form of the electromagnetic phenomena, and therefore put in a mathematical equation, because it's even lower, it's even tinier, it's even more refined that than this electromagnetic one, because the mental or pure psychic level should probably be even constructed of a even lesser raw matter, if I can put it that way, because it has to have certain material, certain material how to
Or
put it,
energy.
prerogatives, yeah, elements. Sorry.
I said, or energy.
Yeah,
particular
or
drop of
energy. It certainly has to have certain materiality. I don't know how to put it this way. And the adepts who were observing the astral body while leaving the bodily biosystem, we're talking about different densities over here. they were observing the human consciousness, the particular one, as a sphere.
Who was doing that,
As
Peter? Sorry.
So, well, the adepts, or not exclusively the adepts, but the individuals who were either gifted by or who were consciously developing the ability to notice, to perceive, to see the lower vibrational level, meaning the consciousness leaving the biosystem after the separation from the body. So it has a form of a sphere, really does, because those electromagnetic fields are somehow, according to the inner logic of the nature or of the mind, they are ordered in a form of a sphere. So inside of himself, each man is a sphere. And there is an alleged paradox, which sounds silly, and why I say so, because we are, each of us is a particular consciousness. We deal with it every day in our daily life when we are awakened and while we sleep. And we resolve the daily issues by using consciousness, or meaning using what our essence is, or by using what we are. And nevertheless, we're still not fully capable to define what the consciousness is, meaning we are not able to define ourselves.
Mhm.
And that's a paradox that the human animal or human being has to face with in order to do a deeper research.
Mhm.
But we're living in an astonishing era where we're discovering almost on daily basis, I'm sure that both of you will agree with me, with a statement that we're discovering the new facts about the nature of reality, or the natures of realities, because there ain't no only one, that's for sure.
Mhm.
And then when we go beyond, whether in a state of a meditation or after using a DMT, after having a DMT experience, we notice we notice inevitably that there are many layers of realities. That's my daughter.
Mhm.
She's a fan of our channel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the theory that we are God and that we are consciousness? And let me like for example, I mean how the microcosm is just a much smaller version of the macrocosm. I mean one of the best examples is you think about what's going on inside an atom, where you have the nucleus and you have the protons and the electrons going around inside within this sphere within the atom. You have the nucleus at the center with other protons and electrons circling around it. And then at the solar system level, you have our sun, and you have all the planets in our solar system circling around the sun. So, I mean, you find the universe operates on the micro level, very similar, or not similar, but almost in exact ways as it does on the macro level. And we also, we also see this principle, like what the idea of a hologram, how the entire universe is a hologram, and how no matter whether or not you have a hologram the size of something that you can fit on your palm, or a hologram the size of the universe, nevertheless it's the universe is still expressing itself. The universe has almost a uniform way, not strictly uniform, but it follows a lot of laws, a lot of immutable laws, whether it's at the cellular level, the atomic level, the subatomic level, or at the galactic level, or the interstellar level. So I mean, the universe has a way of expressing itself, and since the three of us are sitting here having a conversation, and we both know that all three of us are imbued with a consciousness, a personality, and awareness, I mean, aren't we just we are vehicles and avatars, if you will, for the great big is that resides behind the manifesting world, the great is, the great source that takes residence behind the physical plane of existence. We are the representations of it, between 6 and 6.5 feet tall. We are this great sources. We are representatives for it. We are vehicles for it to experience itself. I've always had that, not always, but I've had that sneaking suspicion for quite some time.
It's an old Bill Hicks joke, actually. A man on acid today discovered that the universe is merely God experiencing itself subconsciously, or we are God experiencing himself subconsciously. Which, you know, because at the end of the day, does a rock experience some level lower vibration of consciousness than we do? And to go back to your thing with, you know, the micro and macro, I mean, there's also the concept of infinity, and you know, if things are fractally infinite expansively, then they must be internally too. So even on a subatomic level, do we only know how far our microscopes, like whatever we have to see the smallest part of something, whether it's an atom or particle or whatever?
It could still be akin to making like one step to the moon, right? I mean, it could still just be the equivalent of taking one step to the moon as a human being, right? I mean, yeah. When you're looking at taking the framework of infinity, I mean, yeah,
it's crazy.
It is.
If there's infinite universes and dimensions, then we could be having this conversation as ants on an alternate reality. You know, it's and so like. Yeah, you that's something that I've definitely felt on DMT. Remember I said I felt like I was God because I felt like everything, whereas just normal day-to-day existence, I feel like Gavin Burns, I feel like myself. But in that instance, I felt like everything, and it did feel like God is some overarching theme, like it's everything that ever was, ever will be, and it's just this thing that's just forever.
I just keep coming back to this idea that it's an infinite, eternal personality that permeates all of existence. That
it expresses itself through everything.
Understanding of it.
That expresses itself in whatever way. Building a new planet, an old lady who works in the corner store down the street. Like, it's kind of beautiful and poetic when you really think about it. Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. You were just mentioning your DMT experience, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm having some similarities regarding it, and you know, the colors, as well as we know very well. I mean, we don't use it every day, of course, but according to our experience, what we've already passed through, the colors are slightly or somehow a lot of different, you know, in certain cases. And, you know, they are like in certain cases, at least in my case, on my first DMT trip, the colors were first like a little bit more transparent and limpid. Like if there was about blue, it was like the burning blue. It was like the oil burning and vaporizing, you know, vaporizing around. It was about red. It was the burning red at the first, you know, in the first 15 minutes or half an hour. I can't really calculate because you're not aware of the passing of the internal biological time. So it was about the green. It was the transparent burning green, and it kind of resembles on the pictures made by Nikolai Rerik, the Russian esotericist who had created Lenin, nevertheless, and Dzerzhinsky, the father and founder of the KGB, nevertheless. I mean, it's worthy of mentioning. I will just briefly announce and mention here that his wife, Helena Rerik, was communicating with Indian Mahatmas, you know, like Maitreya and Mahdi and many others. And those Mahatmas, meaning the great souls in Sanskrit, were the outer, you know, representation of the inner core of the earth, the Terra planet, meaning Shambhala and Agartha, and the interior sages. So every one of those Mahatmas was having a whole lot of bundle of reincarnation behind their back, and that's certainly something that requires a more thorough examination and research in our further shows. But when you just said that we are gods in a way that
Or even God
the,
singular,
yeah,
Peter, even
yeah,
God singular. Yeah,
yeah,
G-O-D.
yeah, even, yeah. It reminded me on Timothy Leary's book, one of his great books, although it's very brief, but he said a lot inside, and it's called Your Brain is God. That's how the book is entitled.
Mhm.
And when you mentioned the holograms and the switching and observing reality or realities in different ways, the things had changed in the meanwhile since Michael Talbot had written the holographic universe, I think in 1988. So since that moment on, we're capable of understanding and comprehending, the things totally differently than the people before. So that means that a lot of things and understandings can be comprehended as false, incomplete, and even redundant.
Mhm.
So this is why I am against the organized religion. I don't have nothing against anybody, really. In certain states of mind, while meditating or using very cautiously using DMT or something, you sometimes experience the all acceptance. This is not a bullshit agenda. It really happens sometimes. So you kind of get rid of being nervous by a misunderstanding or something. So I want to say that probably the only religion that is about to survive in the upcoming decades will be one form of Buddhism. I think Mahayana or something. So each one of the other ones are slowly getting, going to be flushed away because they don't satisfy the needs of the human mentality, the human psyche, in a proper scientific way. So it's not a religion, but the only way to transcend and to try to comprehend the realities as the scientific spirituality, which has Nikola Tesla as its patron saint. Although already when I put it this way, it sounds like an organized religion, which I don't support and don't stand for. But okay, and so regarding that, so much regarding that. But when you said, correct me if I'm wrong, Gavin, you said probably even a stone, a pebble or a rock has a certain amount of consciousness, and maybe it does observe the outer reality around itself, right?
Yeah, or it could just be experiencing itself internally. Who knows?
Yeah,
just a
definitely.
bunch of atoms interacting with each other, because
Andy.
nothing, as you know, Peter, is stable. Everything is constantly vibrating and shifting.
Nothing is stable, nothing is firm, nothing is solid, because what we observe right now in this very moment in time is in space-time continuum. I mean, the hardware, the computers, the headphones, the headset, the arms, coffee or coffee cups or whatever else, the desks. Those are just the layers of density, and most of the extraterrestrials that we were contacting with, I mean, the species are coming from the fourth and fifth layer of density. But yeah, and yeah, I mean, okay, the atoms of air are ordered differently than the atoms of the disk. So it's about the layers of density, but the way of perceiving reality is different from what it is, because on the deeper level, that particles in the realm researched by the quantum physics function totally in a different way that our mind is capable of comprehending and they get used to. Because what I, for example, observe as past or present or even future, that's totally differently put and differently set in the realm of quantum physics, as well as because the normal, allegedly normal appearances and explanations of past, present, and future do not function simply in the realm of quantum physics, because what was being perceived as past could be easily messed up with the future in the realm of the particles. And when you mention the pebble or the stone and that's consciousness, I say, oh yeah, definitely, because the atoms amongst themselves are interconnected with they communicate by using light as a mediator. By the mediation of light, the atoms communicate. So what does it mean? Does that lead us to the conclusion that there ain't no dead matter anywhere? Does that lead us to the reinventing and recomprehending the terms of living and dead matter? So if the consciousness, meaning the great is, this is not philosophy, this is the physics, and we understand, I'm saying that for our audience, if it permeates, if it saturates, if it saturates the entirety, the whole space-time continuum, which is endless and therefore does not have the motion, because something which is endless cannot be having motion. If that is something that the universe is, the multiverse is perplexed by, so if it's present in every unit of matter of any density, we can easily get to the conclusion that there ain't no dead matter, that the atoms are alive, that each atom is a perpetuum mobile of certain grade, because it constantly circulates. And
isn't that a scientific fact about energy itself, is it's never destroyed or created, it's only recycled?
Oh yeah, and Tesla would definitely stand by your words regarding pebbles and stones and rocks, because he said, keeping in mind that that what its organization means, I mean, the crystal definitely is a structure that is somehow gifted by a certain amount of consciousness, and it is nevertheless undoubtedly is a living being. It's a form of life, of lower organization. It doesn't maybe have the neural links and nervous system, but it does have the psyche and the consciousness. It functions, although it functions slightly differently from a slug or a whale or a human, but it's still a way of the self-expression of the universe, or the great mind, or the mind. So yeah, I think Tesla would certainly agree with you that it does contain life and consciousness in itself, because what we are trying to express over here is that not those are not the metabolical or catabolical, functions that determine life itself.
Peter, I hate to jump in here, but we're limited on time here, and I hate to do this, because what I noticed with with the Zoom. If it's just you and I, we can go on for as long as possible because we're just
Oh.
using the free version. So if we have 3, we have a time limit. So I don't know if you guys see up in the upper left-hand.
No, yeah, less than a
It
minute.
says less
Yeah.
than a minute. So we are about to get cut off here. So I would love to pick this up where we left off.